Welcome back to the Den of Nerds. I am Josh, and we just got a crazy article out of the Wall Street Journal all about Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios and their fall off. These are things I know quite a bit about, as I have literally covered Marvel Studios pretty much daily for the past 9 years. So in this video, I want to go over the article because there is some new information in here, but this article is also not the full story of what has been going on with Marvel Studios. So I also want to fill in the gaps that the Wall Street Journal article leaves. Might be a long one. Maybe get a snack or something. I don't know. Here we go. First thing I want to point out in this video is who is the audience for the Wall Street Journal. And you might think it's me, Josh, me, nerd here watching your channel. No, it's not you. The Wall Street Journal caters towards Wall Street people or really wealthy people that throw money around in a way that's called investing in a big casino. And this article is ultimately a puff piece for Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, signaling that, yeah, things have been bad, but there's a reason for it. And it was because Kevin Feige wasn't around. But now he is around, and the Russos are coming back, and there's a 10-year plan for the X-Men. It's just important to kind of think of the framing here and understand what's really going on with this article from the Wall Street Journal. The article reports that it didn't talk to Kevin Feige specifically, but it does talk to over a dozen people that have worked for Marvel for over 10 years. So they have like absolutely incredible sources on this thing. This is all real, vetted information. So just keep that in mind. They are trying to get people on Wall Street to think that Marvel is going to be fine and make a lot of money because Kevin Feige is now focusing. They've overhauled the studio, and there's a 10-year plan after the Avengers for the X-Men. Now, the article begins with something pretty wild, an admission that Kevin Feige himself referred to a lot of the Phase 4 Marvel content as homework. The opening paragraph of this article reads, Los Angeles, the head of Marvel Studios told colleagues recently that watching all comic book movie giants' new TV shows and films has started to feel more like homework than entertainment. That's a pretty wild thing to open with in this article, but it's absolutely true. And by the way, this is something that I said years ago when I started to turn on the Phase 4 content. And this is also something that James Gunn has talked about in his preparation for the DCU. He has talked about how he doesn't want these individual films or shows to feel like homework. Now, the article then quickly gets into the fact that this whole Disney Plus expansion thing was really a Disney idea. I'll read a couple paragraphs here which are really telling from the article. It says, soon after Endgame, creative staffers began meeting in their offices on Disney studio lots to figure out where the MCU could possibly go next. In the nearby executive building, Disney's senior leadership had another priority. Chief Executive Bob Iger was launching Disney Plus as his newest answer to Netflix. He needed loads of new series for it and was counting on Marvel to provide many of them. The strategy became just expansion, 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 said a person who worked at Marvel at the time. Feige recently told colleagues he agreed to the plan because of a zealousness to tell more stories and a desire to be an excellent corporate citizen. It turned out to be a mistake. So that's really wild. You have Feige literally telling people, and this is sourced info, right? So this is real. He's literally telling people, we've become homework. The problem with the MCU right now is it's not really all entertaining. It's becoming homework. Our audience is fatigued. And he's literally telling people the Disney Plus stuff, that was Bob Iger's idea, man. It was literally all Disney. And Feige was just trying to be a company man and zealous to tell more stories. Now, the article goes to great lengths to explain how involved Kevin Feige was in the early Marvel movies' success. He basically was the green or red light on every single creative decision and was incredibly involved. And of course, the Marvel process actually started to schedule reshoots for each and every movie, and Marvel's process, much like the Marvel comics system, became really unorthodox in a way that they would always be recreating the movies to try to make them better and better. And the article is setting that up for you because it is explaining that after this whole Disney Plus system and that whole thing, Feige was just really not there in the way that he was when he was making the movie, which we kind of already knew about. But the article does give us some pretty crazy examples of just how bad it got. Check this out. This is from the article. It says, people who worked at Marvel in the early 2020s said it was challenging to secure enough time with Feige to get his feedback. As a result, they sometimes spent weeks on work that proved irrelevant once he weighed in and found themselves with little time to implement his changes before a deadline. Desperate staffers resorted to chasing Feige in the halls to get answers. So that's pretty crazy. And again, it lines up with things that we've heard. For instance, there was a story that came out that Kevin Feige had a single note for She-Hulk. Literally a single note. And it was about how the robot had a hat at the end of the show. But that's crazy. And of course, I think it just got to a point where Kevin was barely involved in any of these shows and was barely given any notes. According to the article, there were people working for weeks and weeks and weeks on things that then would just get thrown out because Kevin would come in and be like, okay, stop doing that. This is terrible. Eliminate it. And it says in the article that it escalated to a point that staffers were literally chasing him down the halls to get answers on things. I mean, that's just absurd, right? So look, we can clearly understand that yes, the new mandate from Disney Plus and all the content that they started to create did make Kevin Feige stretch way too thin. He was obviously not giving notes on all of these different projects. Now, the article then talks about this group of people at Marvel Studios called Parliament. Now, this is something that not a lot of people know or talk about, but there is essentially a think tank or a brain trust at Marvel Studios. They come up with all the creative ideas, how the movie's going to fit together, etc., etc. Kevin Feige is obviously a big part of Parliament. He ultimately makes all the creative decisions, but the ideation and where things will go is handled by Parliament itself. That's a group of people. And the article talks about how this group, Parliament, has a retreat every single year to sort of map out and refine the big plan for Marvel Studios. And the meeting in 2023 was apparently very somber and not great because they basically realized just how badly things were going because of all of the stuff that's been mentioned in the article previously. And it was at this meeting that they talk about changing or salvaging the Kang dynasty. It was in this meeting that they talk about Doctor Doom and bringing back the old Avengers. And the priority in 2023, which was spearheaded by Kevin Feige, was to save the next two Avengers movies. His idea was if they could make the two Avengers movies pop off and be as big as the other installments in the franchise, that could really help to restore Marvel's trust with fans and critics and just moviegoers in general. And the article then talks about bringing the Russo Brothers back and having a 10-year plan for the X-Men. So Kevin Feige has a 10-year plan for the X-Men. And within the scope of the next few years of Marvel and just the future of Marvel overall, you're going to see a reduction. They're going to do like 1, maybe 2 shows a year, 2, maybe 3 movies a year. That's it. And the article kind of promises that Kevin Feige is going to be around for a while and overseeing this 10-year plan for the X-Men. And this is aimed at Wall Street people. This is aimed at investors. This is aimed at fat cats. That's who this is for, and that's what they're trying to sell. Now, that's what's going on in the article. And I think they are telling you the truth. They're just not telling you the whole truth. Unfortunately, this article leaves out 3 main things. And that would be the pandemic, identity politics, and Kevin Feige's previous plan for Secret Wars, which would have seen it release in 2024. That's right, it's crazy, but Kevin Feige actually was originally going to do Secret Wars in 2024. We know this mostly from various insiders like Charles Murphy, who had reported on this in 2019. In fact, I did a whole podcast episode with Charles Murphy where we talked about this, and he essentially admitted that yes, he had heard Secret Wars was going to release in 2024 or possibly early 2025. And the reason that is such an important piece of the puzzle is because it's actually a large reason as to why Kevin Feige wasn't available for all of these different shows. You have to understand what Kevin Feige had just accomplished with the Infinity Saga, and it really started around Age of Ultron. If you think back to Age of Ultron, Joss Whedon was going through it, and he had major beef with the studio. This is a big story that was out there, and this was out there because Kevin Feige was forcing in all this Infinity Gauntlet stuff, all of these setup scenes, and it was around that time that Kevin Feige and Parliament and the Russos and McFeely and Marcus were actually thinking about the big 2 Avengers movies, Infinity War and Endgame, which at the time were referred to as Infinity War Part 1 and Infinity War Part 2. This preparation was to the point that storylines were being set up in all sorts of movies, but they were also working on visual effects and action sequences for the next 2 Avengers films. Main thing you need to realize here is that about 5 years out from the big Infinity War and Endgame films, Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige went all in on setup and preparation for those films. And so coming out in 2020, or really in 2019, after just crushing box office expectations and blowing everybody away with Endgame, Marvel Studios would go to San Diego Comic-Con and would announce a slate for Phase 4 and some of Phase 5, but there was no sign of an Avengers film. And yet we know for sure that he was planning the Avengers film at that time. Now, some of the story here actually has to do with Sony Pictures in 2019 taking the Spider-Man license back. I don't know if you remember this. It was a big thing. Tom Holland ends up calling Bob Iger and Tom Rothman totally wasted and talks them into negotiating, and it actually then leads to the new negotiation in Spider-Man No Way Home. Well, the story goes that Feige was going to use Spider-Man a lot more in Phases 4 and in Phases 5, potentially even in Captain Marvel 2. This comes from Joanna Robinson's book, The Reign of Marvel Studios, and it's an incredible book with a lot of great sources. And there were moments when Brie Larson, Tom Holland, and Chadwick Boseman had literally talked together about how they were going to be the new faces of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So after Chadwick Boseman tragically passes, after the fan base turns on Captain Marvel, and after Sony takes the Spider-Man character back, Kevin Feige was shocked. So the story goes that in 2019, he actually held back from announcing everything he was going to announce while they tried to work this thing out with Sony. Now, the reason that's important is because it really does seem like Kevin was working on Secret Wars even in 2019 and in 2020. There is a reason that the first Disney Plus show was WandaVision, and Wanda is going to play a major role in the next two Avengers movies, and she obviously played a big role in the Multiverse of Madness, which was a huge setup for Avengers Doomsday. And obviously Loki coming out that very same year, one of the very first Disney Plus shows. That was intentional. It literally sets up Kang the Conqueror, the big multiversal villain, and Loki, as we now know, is an incredibly important piece to the Doomsday and Secret Wars puzzle. Okay, so you need to keep in mind that Kevin Feige was going to do Secret Wars in 2024 or 2025, so he was going to be developing this stuff way faster and paying it off much sooner. And then the freaking pandemic happened. And not only did this stop production of like everything that was going on for Marvel Studios, it actually forced Marvel to completely gut and remake Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, this is a less reported, lesser known fact, but the original production name for Falcon and the Winter Soldier was literally Pandemic Productions. And the first version of that show literally had a pandemic plot. The Flag Smashers releasing some big contagion and causing a pandemic or threatening to cause pandemic, and Marvel like saw the real pandemic and they were like, bro, we can't do this, so they literally gutted that show and remade it, which is why that show is complete and total goobly glob despite having some really good stuff in it. By the way, episode 6 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier was reviewed at a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes, which was the lowest rated episode of Marvel television so far, and one of the lowest rated Marvel things ever at the time, because even the critics started to flip on Marvel in that moment during the finale of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where all of the things and all of the goobly glook of the show just failed to come together in a satisfying way. Again, because they completely reshot it and remade it. But it wasn't just Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It was literally every goddamn thing. For instance, the Spider-Man movie, there's actual concept art of the America Chavez in the Spider-Man movie. So think about it like this, guys. You have Kevin Feige announcing a slate and wanting to do Secret Wars, the next Avengers movie, in 2024 or 2025. Then the pandemic happens and it stops all the production. There's 0 Marvel projects in 2020, and every single project, which was again way too many fucking projects because of the Disney Plus mandate, were all changed and delayed. So that's like a really important part of the story that they're leaving out in this Wall Street Journal article. And the last thing I want to talk about as far as the things that they're leaving out of the article has to do with identity politics. Now look, this is obviously a hot button topic. Everybody gets all fired up about this stuff, but I'm just going to kind of speak facts on this. I'm pretty unbiased about it. I don't really give a shit about this kind of stuff, but it is also absolutely a thing, and obviously a lot of people do care about it. So 2 things happened with Marvel Studios as far as I understand it with identity politics. Number 1, it did cause Marvel to hire a lot more diverse creators, which obviously seems like an incredibly good idea. Diversity and diversity of thought is actually really important to adding flavor, to getting good perspectives. However, Marvel also went after lesser seasoned creators, and this ultimately put Kevin Feige and the executives at Marvel Studios in a really tricky spot. There were a lot of moments where Kevin Feige should have come in over the top like he did during the Infinity Saga and mandate changes to different projects. However, because a lot of the new creatives were brought in under the guise, or I guess for the reason of diversity, would look like you hire all these diverse creators and then you just change what they were going to do anyways. You basically take control of their vision anyway. And I also do think Marvel leaned into identity politics, and I don't think it was this big fucking crazy agenda thing. I don't think there's all these like secret investor people forcing them to do it. There's a lot of like different thoughts about this. I just think it was simple as they had a lot of success and they weren't incredibly diverse, and they sort of felt a pressure to become diverse as they had success, to sort of share that success with other types of creatives. But unfortunately, a lot of this ended up just being really derivative. They hired a lot of people that just wanted more females without any kind of real explanation. And really the only reason this was a problem is because it kind of went out of fashion. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of people ever since 2016 started being really triggered by these things and putting a lot of hate out there about it on the internet. So again, it's not really about the issues. It's more the case that Marvel did actually signal boost this kind of stuff at a time when people were kind of over it. And personally, I feel a lot of the changes made to Captain America Brave New World and the changes made to Daredevil Born Again were to take out some of those aggressively political or identity politics ideas. Ultimately, the story goes, Kevin Feige decided he wanted to do Secret Wars as the next big event thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe after Endgame. And I think he obviously wanted to do this because it's kind of like Endgame. Endgame took all of the MCU characters, put them together in a big satisfying story. Kevin was like, I can do that with all the Marvel characters, especially now that we have a lot of our licenses back from Fox. That was the idea, and it seemed like he was just going to set up a bunch of characters, bring them all together in some crazy event, and then do a wild-ass Secret Wars, and then he was going to get into the X-Men. Now, in a new report from Alex Perez, he has shared that the original plan for Doctor Doom was connected to the X-Men films. Now, this gets kind of interesting. I did a whole video on this, which I'll link in the description. It's fascinating. You should watch it because it's really cool how we found out about all of this. But essentially, He Who Remains created the sacred timeline, and he removed certain things from that timeline, like the X-Men and like Doctor Doom. And so the X-Men and Doctor Doom would obviously re-enter the MCU after they defeated He Who Remains and consolidated the entire multiverse. That was always the plan, and they were going to bring RDJ back to do that. And so in a sense, RDJ was always going to be a part of Secret Wars as Doctor Doom, but now Marvel's just changed that so that he's going to be the main villain in Kang Dynasty, and it's called Doomsday, and he's the main villain in Secret Wars, and he's potentially still the main villain in the X-Men saga. We'll talk more about that in a future video. Anyway, the point is this, man. Kevin Feige, Marvel Studios, they bit off way more than they could chew, and yes, some of this was Disney's fault, but I think it was also the case that Kevin hired some of the wrong people. I think he was worried about the optics of being Kevin Feige to some of these new hires, which was ultimately a mistake. The pandemic happened, and it made an already bad situation with the Disney Plus shows even worse. So Marvel really fucked up over the past couple of years, and here's the thing. 2 members of Parliament are gone. Victoria Alonso is gone. Nate Moore is gone. Victoria had to fall on her sword after Quantumania, and it seems like Nate Moore had to fall on his sword for Brave New World. So Marvel's kind of run out of executives that Kevin Feige had leaned on for a lot of these big projects, movies, and shows during phase 4 and 5. And it's now basically just back to being on Kevin. And the thing about this Wall Street Journal article is it is true in the sense that Kevin's now more focused than ever. He's actually going to be creating all of this stuff along with all the filmmakers now. And it was his idea to bring RDJ back as Doctor Doom. And it was his idea to bring the Russos back. And he's leaning on his old collaborators in this, the most important moment of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think the plan in 2023 to basically just put all the effort into the 2 Avengers movies, I think that is the right move. These 2 Avengers movies pop the fuck off, Marvel can basically be back to where it was. But the Thunderbolts is the best thing they've made in years, and it's underperforming right now. It might bomb at the box office despite getting great word of mouth and great reviews, because Marvel fatigue is real, and Marvel Studios made that happen. So the very studio that differentiated themselves, that really earned their place in the space by just making quality, has now earned an opposite reputation for not making quality. Now, Fantastic Four looks really great, and again, it's really about how the Avengers films go and how the X-Men pop off and if they're really a 10-year plan. But I think this is maybe the most we'll ever get from official sources and actual like mainstream journalists as far as what happened with Marvel Studios. And everything that I added to this is verifiable. I actually strongly feel that this is what happened, and I think there's a reason as to why the Wall Street Journal left some of this out of the story. Anyway, it's like the craziest fucking thing of our time, right? Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, how and why did it fall off? Can it come back? That's the big question. That's what everybody's asking. And I think with this article and a lot of the old information, we now have an answer. And we're gonna find out about those Avengers movies, right? Like we're all gonna watch Doomsday, we're all gonna watch Secret Wars, we're gonna see together. Like, is this shit actually dope? Are we back? We're gonna find out, and we're gonna find out together. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.